I'm Shannon.
And I'm Mark.
And this is Dirt Sailor the Podcast. On this episode of Dirt Sailor the Podcast, we discuss how many whistleblowers is enough whistleblowers to warrant an investigation. EVs following some money.
And some numbers.
Happy Throat Punch Thursday.
Oh, no, it's not. Happy Throat Punch Thursday.
How are you doing on this fine day?
Well, now that I drove all the way to my second home and picked up my thing that's required to do this thing, I'm doing great. Wait a minute. That was you that went and got your laptop. I took a nap.
A nap top?
I took a nap. You know, us recovering heartaholics, we have to get our beauty rest, and even a 15-minute one was good.
That's good. Yeah, I forgot the laptop, so we could not record. So I got the laptop, you got the nap top, and here we are.
Yeah, because I broke my rules with the doctor today. I was supposed to only work half day, which technically I only worked half day.
You broke the rules, though?
I did. I stayed on the property a full 10 hours, but I only worked a full 5. So
you already gave more than half.
I gave more than half the crew. Absolutely.
A
couple guys out on the floor working on an airplane. They did very well. They worked most of the day.
I see.
You see?
I see. So we have, I felt like this was a light week of things happening, but also a very heavy week.
Okay, well, on that note, thank you very much. Please come back again. That's the end of the pod. No, I'm kidding.
You are the weakest link. Goodbye. So we had the motion to oust McCarthy, which we talked about in a prior podcast. But we have also now seen a new speaker who was the 4th nominee, I believe, finally get installed into the House of Representatives. It took 4 rounds, but they finally had someone that everybody could apparently get behind in the Republican Party.
And he got more votes than McCarthy did.
Yes. He got all Republican votes. I think McCarthy just got that simple majority.
He got all Democrat votes, too. Got them all to vote no.
Right. They're really good at being unified. Democrats, as we've talked about, they are very good at being unified. But now we have a House Speaker who is from the state of Louisiana.
You know, they probably make all of their reps, the Democrats, read the book, The Art of War by Sun Tzu, because they all toe the line. They're all in lockstep. They all feel that they can be patient. They have plenty of time.
Yes.
Anyway, go ahead. Didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no, you're good. So on his initial round, Mr. Mike Johnson from Louisiana received 128 votes. I guess I should say in the final round, 128 votes, and then became the nominee. So when they went to see if they would actually put him forth, that's when he got over 217, and I believe it was 220 for him. So now we have, I don't know if we're better off, but apparently Mike Johnson touts himself as a Christian conservative. We've seen some of his votes go both ways. He seems to be more fiscally conservative as well. So he has voted no on some of those key Republican agenda items, which is having to do with our military. Sometimes he's voted not to fund certain parts of the military or veterans, but he came at it from a fiscal conservative sort of mindset.
Is that why all the Democrats say that he is a right-wing loon? Because he believes in fiscal conservativeness, if that's a word?
And also because he supported Trump in 2020, and they said that he was an election denier. Never mind every other Democrat, and there have been Republicans in the past, but Democrat who have denied elections in the past. This one was the really, really bad one and the not okay one.
So then anybody that supported Hillary Clinton and she lost and she's an election denier, they're okay.
They are okay. And in fact, I believe Hakeem Jeffries, who is the current number 2, the number 1 for Democrats in the House. Sorry, he's the current number 1 for Democrats.
Be the minority leader?
The minority leader. I believe he was an election denier for Clinton too. So if you can't have a leadership position being an election denier, hey, we got to walk him back as well. But yeah, so we've seen that it kind of, I don't really feel like that's really big news. It's just news. It's just the happenings. It's what's going on. But something that did come out that seems to be in the world of how many is enough? At what point do you think that there is some veracity to claims with enough people? And we are talking about whistleblowers. Is one whistleblower enough?
Well, you have to triangulate, so you need 3.
You need 3?
Yeah.
What about 5?
5's good. How about more?
What if you have 10? Is 10 enough?
10 would be enough.
What if you had 40?
40 would be enough to put the person in prison for life, in my opinion.
Depending on the set of circumstances, right?
The circumstances and the crime, yes.
And the crime. So you would think that having 40 whistleblowers, 40 confidential sources, 40 would be enough for the FBI to run a good bit of background on the person that is the whistle's being blown on or the information's being given on. You would have a nice little criminal investigation or criminal inquiry to see if it warrants an investigation.
Yes.
So there have been over 40 confidential sources on Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, and James Biden. And this is according to Senator Chuck Grassley from Iowa. And it dates back to his time as a vice president. Apparently, the FBI has been provided some pretty good information on the listed parties. And the FBI has repeatedly worked to shut down any inquiry into Joe Biden and his family.
Makes you wonder why, huh? Because they did the same thing for Mr. Bill Clinton. And it has been a known fact because I've heard senators and congressmen that have been in office for years and years and years say the exact same thing, that they've known about the Biden family criminality for years, back when he was a senator. So what does he have on the FBI, or what does the FBI and the CIA have on him that they're using him maybe as a Manchurian candidate or something along those lines, that the guy is untouchable? So like I said a long time ago, as you did as well, he's a guy that came from where? Some little town?
In
Vermont?
Well, he was born in Pennsylvania, but he's from Delaware.
Delaware, that's it. I get all those little communities mixed up because I've, number one, never been back there. Number two, they've never held much value to me.
Well, Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden seem a lot alike, so maybe that might be
the correlation that I draw. But you're right. Whether you have 1, 10, 30, 40, and I guarantee it, there's more than 40, just like there's over 31,000 emails of them using different names.
Right. He had faux email addresses so that way he could continue having conversations when all of those happenings within the government are supposed to be kept by what? The Records Acts. So you have the ones that happened before he was vice president or president. Those are kept under one set of Records Act. And then when he's vice president and president, there's the presidential records. But he gets away with it.
It's curious to figure out what makes them the untouchables. Because to me, if you look at anybody out here in society, your neighbor, my neighbor, our neighbor's neighbor, they would have already been arrested, prosecuted, and put away.
Yes.
They have, to me, no extra value as humans that warrants the kind of protection that they're being given. Especially if you look at the sum total. If you look at the sum total of Biden's parts, he has gotten us almost into World War III. He has given away so much money to other countries, it's ridiculous. His green energy program is a fraud. just like all the others were. Yet we continue to prop an 80-year-old man up that has no cognitive reasoning, doesn't know which direction he's walking in 90% of the time. You have the VP who has to back him up. Say, oh yeah, he's fine. He's not asleep. He knows exactly what he's doing. Come on, peeps. Look at him. No, he does not.
And what's really interesting on this, as kind of a side note, people who are backing him up. So he has the full support of the majority of the View, the women of the View. One of the View hosts did attempt to bring up some of the things that people might take issue with, and she was just talked down. You can't, even if you try to say, hey, we have to consider this or we have to consider that, they will eat you alive if you cross that support threshold. You can do nothing but support.
That's what liberals do when they don't have a real case against you, is they have to yell and scream at you. They have to call you fat, ugly, you got pink eye, you're just a bad person because I'm right, you're wrong. Well, I have news for them. They're wrong. We're right. Just look at the way he carries himself and his mannerisms. Look at the way he looked when he went to Israel to speak to Netanyahu. He looked like he was half asleep. Then he flew and went to, I believe it was Germany. Ramstein?
That would be in Germany, yeah.
Yeah, did a presser there, and he looked like he didn't get any sleep on Air Force One as he flew over there. So he's not here. He's not with it. And I personally don't want to see 500,000 Ukrainians and Russians die for a guy that has no business being in office. I don't want to see Jewish people die. I don't want to see Palestinians die. Now, the terrorists, Hamas, whole different story. I'm not going to get into it because I don't want to knock on my door in the middle of the night by somebody who listened to this podcast and didn't like what I have to say and decide to come send me off to a different land. But you can't, on one hand, allow the surrogate, or not the surrogate, the actual perpetrator, like Iran. You can't give them money. You can't allow them to pump oil. You can't put $100 billion in their bank account, not expect them to do what they're doing. And then you turn around on the other hand and you tell Israel, I got your back. We'll make sure you get everything you need. So you're basically setting up the fight and you're controlling both sides of it. I may be talking around in a circle. Point is, he's not the guy I want in charge handling stuff like this. I really don't.
Well, I don't want him handling stuff like this either. And the background that we don't know is, why is he so special? Is it because he's willing to do whatever it takes on the back end that he makes the great puppet? He's like a knowing, like he knows that he's a puppet and he's okay with that as long as he gets away with whatever he wants to do. So he'll make cover.
Well, and I think you may have something there, but I think that if you look at the Clintons, it's understandable why they're protected. And I say protected, they're protected in a bad way, because when he was governor in Arkansas, they were running drugs and weapons out of Mena, Arkansas with his full consent. He knew what the CIA was doing. So he probably has knowledge that others do not. So therefore, he's a protected person. Right, wrong, or indifferent, because everything they did there, running weapons to the Sandinistas and to the other group and then back to the U.S. and then drugs up here that were killing, young kids, young men, women. That's where he's protected. What Biden has done in his life to afford the same type of coverage, I have no idea what it would be. Not a clue.
Some secret Senate stuff.
Something.
Something's going on. Yep, and they're definitely some of the most well protected, especially if 40 or more whistleblowers or confidential sources or informants aren't enough. And you have the U.S. Cybersecurity Defense Agency immediately working to discredit the Hunter Biden laptop story. So while that may have been started out as a political jab, because it came during the timing of it, especially since they knew about it a year prior, approximately. The timing of it was for political purposes. However, what has been found on there should have gotten people, Hunter Biden and others, arrested and prosecuted. And instead, there have been new emails that were obtained by a law group that allege that the top cybersecurity defense agency in the U.S. immediately worked to discredit the laptop story the same day the New York Post published the article. Now, I could see them investigating it. That would be something they need to jump onto and immediately investigate. But in fact, they worked to discredit it and get it shut down. And the Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, linked Hunter Biden's laptop story to QAnon, Pizzagate, which was a child trafficking theory, to work on the discrediting. It wasn't that they were trying to figure out where it came from, who it came from, and if it was Russian disinformation, it was Russian disinformation. But instead, they worked to actually fabricate the link to discredit.
And we beg to ask that question, why? Why did they get the protection? Hunter Biden, unfortunately, has had a drug addiction a long time. You know how I feel about that? Not my problem. He has a lot of money. His family has millions to put him into rehab and get him going in the right direction where he can get himself turned around. If not, he's one of a few billion people in the world. Not our problem.
Yes.
We should not be paying for his problems.
No, we should not be. We absolutely shouldn't be. And will we ever find out 50 years from now when we're...
No, because they're letting the statute of limitations run out on everything, and they're eventually going to just cover it up. It's going to go away. He may get some little misdemeanor, or he may say, oh, okay, I plead guilty, I'll go to jail for 6 months or whatever into a local house. He's not going to get much.
Speaking of not getting much or getting unequal treatment, so Jamal Bowman pulled the fire alarm and disrupted proceedings in the House of Representatives, correct?
Yes, and that's another load of hooey, and I know where you're going.
So he came out with a story that door he had previously used and it was an accident. He thought he was pulling an automatic door button. The video actually has been released of him walking up to the door. I believe he tries the door, grabs the sign that says not an exit, tosses it, pulls the fire alarm, and immediately walks away. So it seems like with his attempt to open the door, he was actually trying to get an alarm to go off. And that's pure speculation on my part.
It's good speculation.
And when that didn't happen, he tossed the sign, pulled the alarm, and walked. And what did that do? That disrupted an official proceeding, official congressional proceeding. What have the January 6th people been charged and in some cases convicted of?
Disrupting
an official proceeding. Yes. And so since Congress was in session and he disrupted an official proceeding, why didn't he get charged with the same charge? All things being, I understand the day was different. We're not talking about people coming in. We're not talking about whether or not people who was assaulted or what happened, because there are videos of officers getting assaulted or other personnel getting assaulted. That is just a video that, or videos that have been released, but there's also videos of officers escorting Mr. Bullwinkle, QAnon shaman, around, showing him where to go and telling people, hey, don't defile the halls of Congress. Now, They get charged. They spend time in jail. They spend time in prison in some cases for disrupting an official proceeding. Why is this different than the people who peaceably assembled wrongfully and disrupted an official
Because the
proceeding?
fire alarm puller's not a Trump supporter.
Yeah, but of course, he's not a Trump supporter. When he first came out, he talked about how I accidentally. Well, now he did decide to plead guilty to the charge to get it behind him. So it includes 3 months of probation with the prosecutors willing to drop the charge at a sentencing hearing later, according to the plea. It sounds like as long as he writes his letter, apologizes for doing a bad thing, the charge will ultimately be dismissed off his record.
Well, do you think that's right?
I
or
think it
should
should.
he be charged with a felony, taken to trial, convicted for disrupting, even if it's a year in jail? He should do some time for his crime.
Definitely would seem like a two-tier justice system where our congressional members and our senators get treated a whole lot different than regular Joe schmoes do.
Well, they do. They get treated like kings and queens. So you were too young to remember this, but back in the House of Representatives, this is kind of off the beaten path, but it kind of plays into the same thing. They had a check kiting scam going, where the congressmen and women didn't have to have money in an account, but they could borrow money and write hot checks. It happened for months and months, and they, quote, made them pay it back, but nobody was held accountable. You open up a checking account at a bank, you start writing a batch of hot checks, see what happens to you.
Oh, I would go to prison.
You will go to jail. But they all got away with it with a slap on the hand.
Wow. Rules for thee, not for me.
Well, it's kind of like that Menendez.
Yes, yeah. Menendez, senator.
Even just the appearance of all these improprieties. He is such an arrogant individual that he won't step down and walk away from the Senate.
Because what you do is you deny it to the very end. Look at it. What happened the last time he denied to the very end? Acquitted. So you deny to the very end. And in fact, that's the way to go. If you ever admit it, then your goose is cooked. You lose your rights. You get jail time. Look at what happens to those who say, okay, I agree with you. I might have done the wrong thing here. They get the jail and the prison time. You have a certain letter behind your name, you deny to the end, you can get away with a whole lot. Or they just change the rules and the laws for you so you get to do things that us regular schmoes can't do.
I wonder if they have 40 informants that told on him.
Right? How many informants did it take, if any? Or maybe he just made the wrong person mad. Who knows?
He must have ticked off the wrong person, and now he is going to be punished.
Yeah. And so things that we have that political types can do that we can't, going to jump here to California. So California has what's called a behested payments system, which allows public officials and lawmakers to solicit payments from individuals or organizations to another individual or organization for a legislative, governmental, or charitable purpose. And this is according to California's Fair Political Practices Commission. So in total, since 2011, Newsom has actually solicited over $300 million in donations for different causes while he's been governor and lieutenant governor. But it includes money for his wife's California Partners Project and Tides Foundation, consulting fees to the former mayor of Los Angeles, money to climate activist organizations. The law permits what amounts to a shakedown of donors and corporations for their own pet projects. So all they have to do is make it legal. But if you tried to shake somebody down and do the same thing, you're regular schmo. Yes.
Going to jail.
And he Between or within the last 3 years, Newsom has solicited more than 20 payments for his wife's project specifically. Millions.
Who's the dopes?
We're the dopes.
Them or us? Yeah, we are.
We continue to allow it to happen.
Not we as in you and me, but all these sheeple keep allowing this to happen, and they don't hold anybody to account. Just like a governor of a state going to China, which we're having issues with right now, and probably doing and saying things he probably shouldn't.
Oh, 100%. Mister, I'm not running for president, but I'm acting like I'm running for president, and I'm stepping all over the president while running for president, or not running for president.
Well, he did get elected as California governor, right? He should have to stay in the state and govern.
Yes.
Hey, what'd you say you were going to do? Solve the homeless problem.
Still waiting.
Hey, I'm going to help make gas prices go down. Well, wait a minute. It's not the oil companies, now we know, gouging people. It's the state and the federal government.
Yes. For those of you who are unaware of our listenership, California gets more taxes per gallon than the profit margin for the sellers of oil. California gets more money by many times over. So who's gouging whom?
Well, a really smart person and I were talking last night over dinner about taxes around the world and how much we're charged. And there isn't a place on this planet that isn't gouging their citizenry. Quick little case in point. One of the couples, because you know I'm a big YouTuber, one of the couples I follow, their website is called Odd Life Crafting. They did a summary last night of how much they paid to buy this old boat, fix it up, and then turn around and sell it. So they started going over, they're from Brazil, by the way, their import duties. They would order stuff from the U.S. because that's the only place they could get it. So let's say $1,000 part came in for the boat. There was a 100% duty tax on that part. But they had to pay it because you couldn't get it anywhere else, and they couldn't finish the boat if they couldn't get the
Without
products.
it.
So they ended up paying total for the $200,000 they invested in this boat, about $30,000 in import duty taxes, which each item they ordered, it was 100%. 100%.
So that was in Brazil.
In Brazil. Import fees into Brazil coming from the U.S.
I wonder what we're slapping on Brazilians going.
Oh, I'm sure there's some kind of tariff going both directions. But, you know, the government's talking about, oh, well, we're going to punish this country. We're going to do this. You're not punishing the government employees or the leadership. You're punishing the citizenry.
Yes.
Just like I know, here I go sliding off into a tangent again. Just like this war in Ukraine, with Ukraine and Russia, that is about dirt and a little bit more. The number so far of deaths is around 500,000 in 18 months. We just had a mass shooting in
Maine
and one in Florida and one in Chicago over the weekend.
Yes.
But the one in Maine was 17 people plus a handful injured.
The last I had read, it was 18 and 13,
okay,
but
so
I think that
18 and
number
13,
could have been.
and we're up in arms, okay, over these deaths. And believe me, every death hurts. Okay, I'm not saying that it doesn't, but we're flipping ballistic over 18 people. Okay, Chicago, different ethnic group. It happens every weekend. Minimum of 1 to 10 people get shot and killed every weekend in Chicago. Do you hear about it? Nope. It's just normal.
Normal life. It doesn't count as a mass shooting.
Normal life. It doesn't count as a mass shooting. And there was just one this weekend where I think it was 13 or 15 shot, a handful of them died. Okay. But we go across the ocean to Ukraine. 500,000 have been killed by bombs and mortars and guns and tanks and all that. And what is our response? We're going to keep feeding you the cash. We're going to keep feeding you the weapons.
And if you don't support the giving of more money to Ukraine, you are a Russian supporter.
Right.
You're a Putin lover.
Yes, and it's the same people that are sending our money and our weapons and ammunition to Ukraine that because of the death of, 18 to 20 people, they want to take away our Second Amendment rights because it's a assault weapons ban and guns are bad. And well, I listened to a congressman speak the other day before the House of Representatives, and he is correct. There's not a single gun in the world that's ever jumped up all on its own and shot somebody. It's the human condition. It's the mental state. It's the issues we have with people. And they're never willing to address that, or if they do, they sugarcoat it and don't go after the real issue.
Correct. And if you want to look at our laws, what laws we do have on the books and things that we could have done differently in this particular case, in Maine, this individual spent multiple weeks in a mental health facility involuntarily. He didn't voluntarily go there. This individual legally should not have had access to guns.
No, and 100% they should have went to his house, no matter where he was living, even if he was living with a family member or his parents, and scoured that home for weapons and taken them.
Yes, and there was one report that claimed that he bought them after his time in the facility.
Why'd they release him? Did he miraculously heal himself?
And they didn't prosecute him for his threats of shooting up or blowing up a military base.
Should have been locked up. See, that's another case where he was probably on psychotropic drugs also, like most of the others are. And he made statements about injuring other people, but we don't do anything about it till after the fact. Then it becomes a weapons problem. It becomes every law-abiding, tax-paying citizen and gun owner in the country. It's our fault, and it's our problem. No, it is not.
Yeah, so we end up in a situation where we do have laws against things, and not against, but against gun ownership. We say, okay, if you have a mental health issue, you will be precluded from owning a gun. But if we don't take the right steps to enforce the laws that we have, it seems like we're almost doing it on purpose. We set ourselves up for this very situation. And in fact, there was a young student in Tennessee who threatened to basically become a school shooter. He had a list of people that he was going to go after, and he warned someone not to go to school on a particular day because he was going to shoot up the school, and he didn't want that kid to get shot because he liked that kid. The kid was nice to him at some point. So the kid goes and tells presumably his parents, who go to authorities, and they do find out that this kid in fact has a plan to become a next school shooter in Tennessee. So what happens? Tennessee has already seen a school shooter recently too. What did they do this school year? They allowed that student to return to the classroom, sitting right next to the very person in the classroom that turned him in for his plan to become the next school shooter.
Great judgment call.
And when the parents of multiple kids who were either targeted or had turned evidence against this child went to the school administration and said, why is this kid in the classroom? You're sticking them in the class next to my kid who actually had to testify against him in court. And they said, go tell it to, the Tennessee elected representatives and get guns banned if you want to see anything done about it. They weren't going to stop him from being next to his intended victims.
I would never let him into another school in the Tennessee school district ever.
Yeah.
And then when somebody like that does tip off and go off the deep end, then it's not the administrator's fault that made this decision. It's everybody else's. This makes you go, huh?
Yes. So when you do something about it and there are laws in place, and then you say, hey, we're not going to put perpetrators and intended perpetrators next to their intended victims. Instead, we're going to say guns were the problem, not the kid doing all of the threatening, his running drills, practicing, going to carry out this
That's why
spree.
I would have taken my kids and or grandkids out of that school system immediately. And I would have warned and raised the biggest flag I could all the way across the country to anybody that would listen. I would make some noise. Unbelievable.
Yes.
Wonder how many of these are copycats again the last couple of weeks, because we have another person who took an AR-style rifle, ammunition, explosives, and he was found dead in a popular amusement park bathroom with a note. It says, all I wanted to do is get in the cave. I'm not a killer.
Wow.
So probably part of this with the Israeli Hamas war that's going on right now. And they may not have anything to do as far as ethnic group, but it tends to get people riled up and they tend to do things outside of the box.
Well, speaking about riling people up, in Russia, you have mobs yelling Allah Akbar and hunting down Jews at the airport because they heard that a plane from Israel was landing. You have people doing their pro-Palestinian marches all over the United States. And when they go and they find out Jewish people are present, they are going after them, threatening them, and in some cases physically attacking them. And we're supposed to say, oh, they're really nice people. It's just an unfortunate situation. We're riling people up. It is hurting people. What's the Democrat slogan? Stay angry? Isn't that what we were told a few years back? To always stay angry. So if you're always staying angry, everybody else is always wrong. Words are violent. So now you're able to commit violence against people with impunity.
Well, and we have a squad of Congress people that are riling these people up as well, and they will not retract their statements.
Not just riling, they're lying. They're riling them up by lying.
They're flat out lying. You know, the interesting thing about all that is, I know I've said it every week for like the last 2 or 3 weeks. If you look at the Jewish people and you look at what they have been through over the last couple thousand years or more, it blows your mind how these people have been beat down. They've been conquered multiple times by by Assyrians, by Persians, by Greeks,
Romans,
Egyptians, Romans. I mean, you just go right down the line from, like 1900 BC all the way down to present time. And I believe in a statement that was made by the Israeli leadership the last couple of days is they're fighting for their very existence this time.
They're absolutely fighting for their very existence. You have 22 Arab countries nearby. There is only one Jewish state, 22, I believe, Muslim states around that whole area, and one Jewish state. And the response is, the Jewish state must not exist. You are attempting to wipe out an entire people yet again. You've done it generation after generation. And it's not just in the region. As the Jewish people have been dispersed around the world, we've seen the intentional killing of Jews throughout the world, or the intentional acts of excluding them. Even in Russia, when Catherine the Great, when Catherine was calling originally for her German people to come and settle the lands in Russia and start farming them on areas like the Volga River, promising.
You know any family members that might be part of that?
I might. having them come and farm and come to Russia. When that didn't quite get as many people as she thought, she started inviting people of the world except the Jews. She was also a Jewish hating individual. Then you see here in Russia just recently that they hear that there's going to be a plane full of people from Israel. They could be Jewish, so therefore let's go after them too. The world hates the Jewish people. And it is a group that we seem to openly discuss their very stamped out existence. Like, no, they're apartheid, the apartheid state, or the colonizers. We hear that they're called colonizers. And when the two-state solution is being offered, and it was offered back in 1948, the Jewish people accepted, the Israelis accepted. Nobody else wanted that second state to officially exist. So technically the Palestinians said no. And what has happened over the years since then? War after war after war, attack after attack after attack. And every time the Israelis respond, they are made out to be the bad guys. Every time.
That was the very thing you saw right after that happened too. Within 2 days, a lot of folks were backing Israel. Within 4 days, it was slow down. We need to have a pause here. We need humanitarian aid to go into Gaza. So you, Israel, the bully, need to stop.
Yes, they're not allowed to go and stop the very people who planned the attack and likely would continue an attack. It was not just a one-off. They have been doing this over the years. So when Israel said, no, we're gonna end this, we need to stop getting killed. 4 days, 5 days later, it's you just have to die. You just every time they launch a rocket and it hits your people, just die. You're not allowed to do anything about it. You're not allowed to stop it. You have to keep taking the assault.
Well, how would you like to live in an environment like that where you're trained by your parents in the military and the government that every day when you hear an alarm or a siren go off, or now they have apps for your phones, you run into a bomb shelter. So you're out playing as a kindergartner in the playground and you have to run every day into a bomb shelter because some group in their charter has annihilation and death to Jews.
Yes.
Yet when you try, like we just said, when you try to defend yourself, you're the bad guy, you're the bully. Well, I think that a lot of people have it wrong, that they are not the bully. Or are they? Are they the bad people?
Apparently, we're supposed to believe that they are. If you look at as they've talked about, the open-air prisons. Well, why are they open-air prisons? Would not stop attacking. Would not stop their attempt to murder people. And that was over and over again. And they become the bully because they make living conditions bad. Nobody else in the region, 22 other nations, nobody will take them in. In part, is it because that leadership, not just Hamas, PLO, has attempted to assassinate people? No other country wants to take these would-be assassins in. What's the other two-state solution that...
So let's throw this out there. How about if Israel just out of the blue said, okay, let's go ahead and swap. We'll move all of the Jews into the Gaza Strip and we'll let all the Palestinians take the land. What do you think the end result would be? They would still have in their charter death to Jews.
And do you know why the land has gotten so small for the Palestinians?
Global warming?
Yes, it shrunk due to global warming and the water coming in.
Okay. Why?
Because of the number of times that the Palestinian people have attempted war and they've gotten together with other countries and attacked Israel, and Israel took more land each time as a part of their taking after a war victory. So they actually had much less land to begin with.
Right. Well, they're trying to protect their citizens. And if it means creating a larger buffer zone, that's what they do.
Then you create a larger buffer zone. And to go back to being called colonizers, that they took over a land. They took over a land that they lived in, that they were colonized, if you will. And so now apparently the rule is that if you get colonized, you're allowed to take it back, except if you're Jewish. Jordan doesn't want them. Egypt doesn't want them. Israel is required to take them. And in fact, the two-state solution mentioned just a bit ago, in that part of the demands is the displaced people get to take back their housing inside Israel, locations inside Israel, and all of their descendant relatives, which numbers over 5 million in a country of 9 million. That's also one of the two-state solution requirements. Do you think that Rhode Island or New Jersey could absorb over 5 million people who hate you?
No.
Who hate them?
No.
And it would all be hunky-dory?
No. So I said, I think we ought to just fly a bunch of airplanes over there, just pick up all the Jewish people, bring them over here to the States, and we'll pick a state and just give it to them. Say, here you go. Here's your new land.
Not the Holy
Land.
Land.
Oh, wait a minute. We can't. It's not the Holy Land. We can't go back and read America's history, 2,000 to 5,000 years ago and see when the temple was built, and when the temple was torn down, and when the temple was rebuilt. And by the way, a lot of those Jewish people, even though they were conquered multiple times, never left that land.
Yes, they were still there.
They were still there.
Some left, some were dispersed, but not all of them. And they have been continually residing there.
What's the other little bit of land there in Israel that's basically an open-air prison?
The West Bank.
The West Bank. They don't seem to launch missiles and do as much crazy stuff there.
That's where Hezbollah is. It's coming from the West Bank.
Oh, I thought it was coming from Syria. I thought Hezbollah was up in Syria.
Both. No, well, they feed the West Bank.
Ah.
So does Iran.
You know who feeds Jordan?
Iran feeds everybody. Who feeds Jordan?
The United States of America, with $5 billion in taxpayer money.
So the Queen is...
Yes, and then we have to listen to the King of Jordan badmouth us, badmouth Israel. No, I don't know if he's just doing that for lip service to keep his Palestinian people calm there in Jordan, or what his end game is. But yes, we have the Queen, his wife, flying around on our dollar and then bad-mouthing us in Israel.
Oh, and by the way, my bad, part of Hezbollah is actually Lebanon.
Yes, Lebanon and Syria.
Yes. So my bad on that. I got
no
my little map in my head.
Look how big the West Bank is. It's looking at that map, it's rather large relative to the size of Israel.
Yes, it is.
So you could call that your second state right there. So looking at that map, if you pop it back up.
Right here.
I would just join the two, the Gaza Strip and the West Bank across there. And I would tell them, landmass-wise, that's your two-state solution. You take that, we take the rest.
The original map in 1948 by the UN General Assembly, it had 3 distinct areas for the Palestinians and the Israelis. So if you look at it, there was actually a tip connected up between what we called Gaza and what is called the West Bank. And so if looking at the plan of partition, you have the Arab state, the Jewish state, and then the city of Jerusalem was going to be kept as a UN-controlled zone. It wasn't going to be a part of that. And then over time, through the wars, you have the land changing. So it would be called the Palestinian land loss. And over each war, you had 1946, which pretty much everything was Palestinian land. 1947, that was getting a little bit more Jewish land, and they were the Jewish land was most of the garbage land.
Yeah, the unfarmable desert wasteland. Oh, you mean that?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so then, and they declared their independence 1948. They accepted that they were going to be an independent nation. There was warring then. And then in 1967, went to war again. And then they pretty much took over the majority of the land, but they still left the West Bank and they still left Gaza, but in smaller portions. And then they eventually took Jerusalem.
So I have a novel concept for you.
But only after they lost, the other side lost in their war. So what's the novel?
And that's where I was going to go with that, is all of the whoopings that Israel and the Jewish people have taken over the thousands of years. Why don't we allow them and tell them now, okay, you guys are going to strap it up, winner take all. We keep Iran out of it. We keep Syria out of it. If they interject, we take care of them militarily, and we let the Jews and the Palestinians within that country strap it up, winner take all. We're done. No more wars.
Well, I say we quit funding the war, but can you really say that we get to determine who gets to go to war around the world?
We do all the time. We're in geopolitics all the time, and our war machine, our
military industrial complex.
I was trying to spit out the M. Military industrial complex makes lots of money off of this.
We need war so they can remain rich.
Well, what they need to do is quit playing both sides of the fence and giving money to both sides. And then when something like this breaks out, throw your hands up and go, oh my God, what did we do wrong?
And then you have funding both sides. So we have this situation with Israel. We have said, Israel, we are on your side. You're our people. You need help. We sent how many military members started off that way? Just our Navy alone, they started heading straight to be backup. But we have our claims support Ukraine, right? Over and over again. Ukraine war funding, Ukraine war funding, Ukraine war funding. We have this situation in Israel where we have said, we support you, Israel. Then what does Biden say? Oh, yes, but we're going to give more money to Ukraine. We're going to give money to Gaza. The Palestinian people. Oh, we might throw some in there for our U.S. border and Israel, but really the bulk of the money is going to Ukraine. How do you fund all sides of every war? If you're sending money to Gaza, oh, we're sending aid to Gaza. Really? You think that that's where it's going?
Because I heard an expert say yesterday that all these college graduates that are running the show right now, this was their college thesis, and it worked great on paper, but now look what's happened. It has blown up in their faces, literally. And he was a very, very smart individual. And my eyes open up and go, man, that's what my podcast partner and I talk about all the time, is these great college experts that do these models while they're in college, and then they try to put it into practical application, and it doesn't work. While they're messing with people's lives here. And because they think that they need to appease people and keep them on our side and fund them with money, they should realize now it doesn't work. It does not work. Just like the Persians. Persians have been warring with people for years. They were actually one of the largest nations in large. There was 3 different names for the Persians back in the day, a couple thousand years ago. And they were huge, huge. They were conquering everybody because they were not a weak nation. And they're not a weak nation now unless we make them a weak nation. Because we have the power and the might to actually thump them and put them in their place. Just like I've been saying, we have the aircraft carriers on the surface. These people do not know what's underneath the water. One boomer could end this thing in 30 minutes. Period. Cut and dry, and nobody has that kind of military like we do. They could end Iran, end Syria, end it all 20 minutes. Not that I want them to do that, but it's doable, it's plausible. But because we're allowing them to get away with stuff, they don't fear our big weapons. Speaking of big weapons, do you know now we have a new nuclear bomb that's 24 times more powerful than what was dropped on Japan?
No, I did not know
Yes,
that.
just developed it. We just released all this information the last few days.
Or to let people know that will really, really hurt them.
Because of the changing climate around the world, we needed a stronger strategic deterrent so we could retire some of the older stuff and stay within all the treaties and put these bigger bombs in storage. Well, if you're not going to use them, I know deterrence, what it means. I understand all that, but why build them? Why waste the money? Make a conventional one that you can really thump somebody's rump with, and don't make these big nuclear bombs anymore.
Well, the military-industrial complex got their money.
They got lots of money.
Lots of money.
And Vegas got money, or Nevada, because we just tested this thing in Nevada last week.
In their desert.
In their desert, and it went off and went boom, so they know it works. Why not use a neutron bomb? We have neutron bombs too. Neutron bombs kill everything, but they don't knock down the buildings. So after a certain amount of time, you can go in and take over the place.
Utilize it again?
Yes.
Well, let's talk about numbers. You want to talk about some numbers?
1, 2, 3. Yeah, no.
Skip a few. Yeah. We're going to bring it back here to the United States, and we're going to talk about some numbers.
Numbers.
Some of the things that we like to do here in the United States is spend a lot of money, a lot of other people's money. Sometimes we do that overseas, and sometimes we do that with our best friends. We give their organizations some money. Well, right now, the EV industry actually isn't doing very hot. They are having a harder time selling their vehicles, despite the fact that they are heavily funded through taxpayer dollars to lower the cost to the consumer. We're paying it out in taxes. Biden, who appointed Podesta in September of 2022 to lead the White House Office of Clean Energy and Innovation and its implementation, has been implementing programs for the $739 billion climate and tax bill, which enables the government to distribute more than $350 billion worth of loans and grants to green energy projects nationwide. We have been funding so much in the EV industry. So, for instance, we have Rivian. We've been funding them.
We funded Rivian?
Yes, because
it's a beautiful truck.
It is, because it is an EV truck. They lost $6.8 billion in 2021.
That's a big number.
Oh, sorry. That was 2022. $6.8 billion. In 2021, it was $4.7 billion. So we're over $10 billion, over $11 billion actually.
But at some point in time, we'll start making money.
Yes, so the company reported that it produced 24,337 vehicles, delivered 20,332 vehicles. So it lost $33,087 per car. And overall, it just has been struggling. So as each of these companies are being given all of these tax dollars to produce this next level green energy business, they are losing money. Losing money with free money.
Losing money with our money.
Yes.
Losing our money.
And so we saw it under Obama. There was a lot of green energy funding there. And then all of those companies started filing for bankruptcy. So now the Biden administration is trying to see how they can work with these EV companies because they're still not widely accepted. The cars aren't being as accepted by the consumer. There are more problems than the consumer wants to deal with. And even Toyota has come out and said that they don't believe in EVs and they will not go EV. That's their way forward right now.
Well, if you run the numbers, so if you jump in here in Fresno in a basic model Tesla.
Tesla Model 3?
Model 3.
Okay.
Okay, and you drive to, say you want to go to LA, but you have time constraints. So
Okay.
it takes you 2 hours to get to the bottom of the Grapevine.
That sounds about right.
A 2.5, where there's bunches of charge stations all around the restaurants there.
Yes.
So how long you have to sit there to hot charge? Hour?
Depends on your vehicle. 30 minutes to an hour if there's no line. Sometimes that line is wrapped all the way around the charging area.
Perfect scenario, perfect car, no line. So then let's say it takes an hour.
Okay.
So now you're at 3 hours. Then you have to drive another hour and a half into LA proper. Okay, depending on where you're going, you may be going to the other end. Well, let's go a little further. Let's go to San Diego. We're going to the San Diego Zoo. So then you have to stop a little past LA to charge again. So you got another hour. So there's 5 hours. Okay. Then you get to San Diego, you go to the zoo. Then before you head back, you have to recharge. Okay. How long does it take to pick an airline? Southwest Airlines from Fresno to San Diego. Hour 45 minutes.
So they don't have a direct flight to San Diego, but even, let's just say you fly through Las Vegas, they fly Fresno, Denver, Fresno, Las Vegas. So if you go Fresno, Las Vegas, it's an hour flight. And if you go Vegas to San Diego, you're looking at another hour-ish, hour and a half. So now you're at 2.5 hours. The layover times can go either way, but I have found them to be quite short in Las Vegas, that they have a good amount of flights going out of there. So now you're at 2.5 hours of flight time. Let's call it an hour layover. So that's 3.5 hours, and you got to the airport an hour and a half early, 5 hours.
And less. So what you've done is you've increased your fun time with your family down in San Diego. You would have had to stop 1 to 2 to 3 times to charge. So you're looking at meals and snacks. So you're spending more money there. You spend an exorbitant amount of money for the car. And that's why some people look at it and say, this just doesn't make economical sense to me when I'm a lower middle to an upper middle class person, when I can get there much faster.
So as we were talking about it, I do want to say I did bring up to look at a flight that would be a direct nonstop. Sorry, not a direct, a nonstop flight. And we do have them out of Fresno going nonstop to San Diego.
Yeah, it's Horizon Air or SkyWest or Alaska.
Alaska, operated by SkyWest.
Yes.
So let's use that one
I
instead
knew that. I just didn't want to throw SkyWest in there since I worked for them.
Well, Alaska does fly, and it's just over an hour of flight time. The listed flight time is, gate to gate time, but we'll call it an hour and 17 minutes.
And that's what some people do, is they look at the economics because their time is valuable. So it may be worth it to them to pay the extra money for the flight.
$138 round trip. You can get.
Yeah, see, that's cheap.
$138. You're going to pay that, and you have electric that you have to pay for.
See, I did not know that until you schooled me on that like 3 weeks ago. I always thought these charge stations were free.
Originally they were. That's actually how they got the original people to buy into Tesla when they were laying the groundwork. And I can't remember the exact year, but there was a time where they said this point forward, it's not free.
Did not know that.
And that's assuming Tesla has some of the best infrastructure. So if you need to charge a car, Tesla has done a really good job at getting across the country and giving you places to charge your car. If you're not a Tesla, you will have a much harder time. Just ask our Secretary of Energy.
That's right. Try to go across. You're right.
So, but $138 round trip. Actually, now that we brought that up, I think I might go take a flight, because that is not bad at all.
That's cheap. No, see, I would rather do that because my time is valuable.
You're going to save yourself more than 2 hours of time. And we're talking about everything going perfectly, but everything has to go perfectly for your charge stations too.
Right, because you could have a flat tire, you could have charging station issues, you could have a breakdown, just like anything else, even with a gasoline or diesel powered car.
So in more numbers having to do with electric vehicles, we have been sold this idea that it is cheaper to fuel an electric vehicle than it is to fuel a gas-powered vehicle. Well, a new study has come out, and according to their numbers, their calculations, they have found that an electric vehicle pays the equivalent of $17.33 a gallon. Now they took different costs of ownership and running into the way they calculated their costs per gallon. But what they said was the average model year 2021 EV would cost around $48,698 more to own over a 10-year period without the $22 billion in government help or assistance or favors, whatever you want to call it, given to EV manufacturers and owners, because you get money back federally if you buy an EV, $7,500 on some of these. And in the production phase, those companies got it too. So if you include the subsidies that are there into the cost of ownership, would you have bought a vehicle if it cost you $50,000 more than the equivalent gas-powered car?
Nope.
We're paying for it.
I want a free car.
But because we don't see it, we don't see that we're paying for it. It's our tax dollars. It's out of our head. Those rich elitists are paying their fair share. Those companies are having to pay their fair share. So we are okay with it. But right now, car companies are hard pressed to sell their EVs. Ford Motor Company is losing over $70,000 on each EV it currently sells. So there are some numbers for you. $17.33.
See, that's one of the reasons the auto groups are striking right now, is because they lost a lot of their wages and benefits a few years ago that they haven't recouped. And the electric vehicle industry may potentially kill a majority of those jobs. And that's why they're fighting, just like Israel, for their very survival.
So in more number news, speaking of
numbers,
how much you're paying and what you're fighting for, the cost of home ownership has gone significantly up under a lot of Biden's new rules for consumers. So some of those numbers, gas furnaces saw a $494 increase, and it comes from pushing energy efficiency standards for residential gas furnaces. So by making them more efficient, which is a great thing to think about, the way to produce it costs more money. So then you as a consumer, when you buy it, you're not actually seeing those cost savings on the energy efficiency because you had to pay more to get the gas furnace. Light bulbs, $140 increase. Air conditioning, an $1,100 increase. And this is because the Biden administration has banned R22 refrigerants. Water heaters, $2,800 increase. And that's pushing for higher efficiency water heaters. So your cost savings that they always tout on these water heaters or the gas furnaces, the cost savings is eaten by the purchase of the new product to keep you efficient. Washing machines, $200 increase. Dishwashers, $225. Cars, $932. Ceiling fans, $25. Gas stoves, somewhere between $800 and $3,250 increase. That one is uncertain right now, but it comes from proposals of the way to either ban or require certain things to happen with these gas stoves.
Well, over half the country numbers are renters now, so they're not going to have to pay for the appliances and stuff. That will be technically they will, because they'll raise rents to cover the cost.
And then they'll say that their landlord is being a price gouger.
Yes.
So there's just some numbers for you, some numbers that I was coming across this week.
I like them numbers.
There were lots of numbers, so I thought I would throw them out there for our listeners to just think about some of those rules and regulations and what they're doing to your pocketbook. And that is completely aside from any inflation and from like the food inflation that we've seen, where the food item gets smaller, but the price goes up.
And that's why we always say elections have consequences. So you need to be very, very cognizant of who you're voting for. Look at the person, look at their record, see how they have voted, see how they live their lifestyle, and make a decision based on, I don't know if critical thinking is the right word, but an astute decision don't make it based on the person's looks or how they smile or they make you laugh or they can play the saxophone like Bill Clinton, because there was like 10% of the women said they voted for him just because he was handsome and could play the saxophone. So just be very mindful. And I'm not telling you how to vote, but be an informed voter.
So another thing that I'd like to bring up, it kind of has to do with numbers. I wonder if the numbers will change for the UFC. Not sure if you've heard, but the UFC has partnered with an organization that saw their numbers go way down, their purchase go way down. So UFC has just announced that they have a massive deal with Bud Light, and Bud Light is going to be the official
beer of the UFC.
Yes.
Well, those UFC fighters are pretty strong dudes. I didn't think that Bud Light was a macho beer. I thought they would join with an IPA company, get some real stout stuff.
I cannot imagine how much money was promised.
Well, Dana White, who is the owner of the UFC, I believe, said that it's not about the money.
Well, of course, it's not about the money.
It's never about the money.
But he started talking about how they employ so many people, what they've done for their community, what they've done across the U.S. as a whole as a reason to partner with them, and believed that they could both have.
Well, he's one of the guys that if the partnership goes south, he'll let them know and he'll kick them to the curb. He won't play games with them.
So Bud Light paid $100 million to be the official beer of the UFC.
Wonder how much of that Dana White gets for his own little pocket.
Right. I just thought that was interesting. So it's a big question mark as to whether or not UFC will see a decline
in viewership
because of their...
Americans have short memories. They'll forget about that post haste. It will not last long. It'll change pretty quick.
We'll see how they do then. And if you look at the Anheuser-Busch, who distributes Bud Light and everything else that they distribute, they haven't been hard pressed for other portions of their client or their company to make money. They're still selling. It's not been a 100% blackout. But somebody who is on 100% blackout right now, Mike Pence, he suspended his presidential campaign.
He did, because he saw the writing on the proverbial wall.
That hardly anyone wanted to vote for him.
Well, a majority of the quote MAGA, or the right wing of the Republican Party, they don't like him because he was unloyal to his former boss.
Yes.
And that would have been millions upon millions of votes.
Well, look at how many people are still saying they're going to vote for Trump. So those people are clearly not going to support Mike Pence if they are supporting Trump. And I don't mean that in the sense of, oh, well, if you're voting for Trump, you're not supporting anyone else either. But when you see all of the candidates, you usually have this is my number one, this is my number two, this is my number three. So if somebody does drop off, but a Trump supporter is not going to turn around and be a Pence supporter. So it will be interesting to see how things go forward, because now you have all of these states who have individuals from their state attempting to sue to make sure that Trump cannot be on the ballot in that state should he get the nomination for the Republican Party.
The Supreme Court ruled that, and I could be wrong, it might have been a dream, that they can't do that. It's unconstitutional.
Constitution.
Right, they just change the rules, make up their own as they go. Well, there's so many lawsuits. He's going to be mired in all this stuff for quite a while.
Do you think he'll pardon himself if he becomes president? Make it all go away?
I would too. But it appears that Nikki Haley, who's a pretty interesting candidate, has jumped up and is now neck and neck with the Florida governor.
Oh, Ron DeSantis.
Ron DeSantis. So now the word is that she may be one of the only ones that can compete with Trump. Well, we shall see, because even though her and DeSantis are neck and neck, Trump is still, I think, at the last check, about 30 points ahead of her.
At least. I know that she's had some major gains, like you just stated, but Trump has been number one this entire time, and he is in court most of his days, mired in mounting legal trouble, apparently getting fined $10,000 at a time for speaking out on a gag order.
I don't understand the gag order thing, because he should be allowed to speak his piece. If the prosecutors can go out there and run their mouth, then he should be allowed to as well. Well, at least his attorneys can go out and say things. And it's going to be interesting. I think he'll win this one that's going on in New York right now.
You think so?
Yes.
Even with the judge. So the judge is the one deciding the case, and he's already made rulings against Trump. You think he will still come out on top? I think
he's still going to come out on top, because they're going to show in the end that he's wrong, the DA's wrong, and if not, they'll appeal it. It'll go right to the upper court. Most of these are going to go to the Supreme Court eventually. The one that's going to be interesting is the January 6th, and him contesting the election and everything he said, supposedly to all of these former, quote, attorneys that are now flipping and taking plea deals because they're all a bunch of cowards. You know what? And what's his name that left Fox News that was fired?
Tucker Carlson.
Tucker made the comment early on that this Sidney Powell was a fraud.
So I remember seeing some of her messages that she would put out, and I definitely got fraud vibes and non-truth teller vibes from her early on.
And I think that his attorneys, especially, I can't remember his lead female attorney's name, but she'll eat them up. She is such a professional, so articulate, knows the law, has probably a great staff behind her. She'll kick their butts hands down. But what I was going to get at, though, is Trump claims to have evidence that he's been holding on to. So it's going to be interesting to see what gets presented to back up his side of the story. Well, I think if he just pops up and says, well, Facebook did this, Twitter did that, and the FBI was against me. They were withholding stuff. They were going to Facebook, telling them to hide stuff, not allow, just the whole sum total of all the parts, that he may win that one pretty handily too. But that's another one that if he doesn't, will go to the Supreme Court, and it'll go based on freedom of speech, the First Amendment. Because you can contest something. Look at Hillary. She still thinks that she won the election, that it was Russian interference, when it's been 100% proven to be fake.
Well, she should know. She created the Russian interference.
She's the one that started the whole thing.
It will be interesting to see how it does play out.
Yes, I just hope they just keep it going past the 2024 election so we can get him elected, and then they can finish out all these trials.
Well, they said that in part why they pushed the trials to go as soon as they did was to make sure that he couldn't get to that point, that he would have convictions on his record ahead of time, ahead of the elections.
Right. Well, we shall see.
This has been a podcast produced and edited by the Dirt Sailor Duo. Mark and Shannon are a father-daughter team who both served in the United States Navy. This production is protected by copyright laws. Until next time, anchors away.